All right, welcome everybody. We're just having folks slowly trickle in, but we can begin. Today's webinar is titled Be Ready, Wildfires. Thank you so much for joining us today. This session is part of Prepared Together, Canadian Red Cross Disaster Preparedness Virtual Learning Series. And today's session is presented in English. Over the spring and summer of 2024, we are predicted to bring an unprecedented level of intensity for emergencies across the country. The goal of the Canadian Red Cross Disaster Preparedness Series is to support people and communities to prepare for, increase their resilience to, and respond to future disasters. We are hosting learning sessions throughout the summer in both English and French. Use the QR code on your screen to visit our website to learn more and register for our other programming. We will also post the webpage in the chat. We'll do that right now. There you go. So a couple of housekeeping items before we begin today's session. Closed captioning is available in both English and French. Just click the closed captioning button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. Today's session will also be recorded and sent to all registrants. We will post recordings on our webinar series webpage as well. At the end of today's session, we will have a Q&A period, so please leave your questions in the Q&A box in the control panel at the bottom of your screen, not the chat, and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the session. We will be interacting with the facilitators using the chat box today as well, but to ensure your questions get answered, please use the Q&A box. Any questions about today's programming, you can also email us at rrr@redcross.ca. Okay. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our Canadian Red Cross presenters for today, Jillian and Anna. Welcome.
Thank you very much, April. Okay, so welcome everybody to the Be Ready webinar on wildfires. And thanks very much for your interest and thank you for joining us today and making time and making a commitment to this program. My name is Anna Savitsky and I'm calling in from Ottawa. I'm a 20-year volunteer with the Red Cross, and I've been doing Be Ready workshops for a number of years, both in person and virtually, but this is the first time for Be Ready Wildfires, and with Jillian, my co-facilitator. I'm based in Ottawa, and I'm involved in numerous Red Cross programs here. I've been deployed locally, provincially, and nationally in a variety of capacities. So I'm going to turn it over to Jillian to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Anna. Hello, everybody. And again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jillian Maloney. I'm based in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. I am the program lead for disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation in Atlantic Canada, but I've also been a volunteer with Red Cross since 2012. And like Anna, I've also deployed across the country and supported many Be Ready presentations. And likewise, my first time presenting the wildfire content, but certainly I have been deployed to several wildfires across the country. So looking forward to our discussions today. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, Jillian. So in the chat, I've indicated my land acknowledgement that I live, work, play, and volunteer in unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and I see that Jillian has done the same. Thank you very much, Jillian. If you like, please do so in the chat and make your own and share your own land acknowledgement with the rest of the group. All right, so we're going to have an icebreaker. I want you to just introduce yourselves in the chat, and the question that I have for you is, what is the one item you would like to have in an emergency? So just let us know where you're calling in from, and then let us know what is the one item you would like to have in an emergency. Oh, good. Water. I see that coming in. Water. Yes. Welcome from Halifax, St. John, water, food, Winnipeg, go bag. All right, Treaty 8, Whitehorse. Oh my gosh, Jillian, they're all across Canada. Bella, BC, water. I see some unanimity here. Lots of people will bring water. Excellent. Thank you very much for for answering that question. So today we're going to be, just keep on coming. Today we're going to be discussing how to prepare for wildfires and reduce the risk of wildfires before they happen, because always it's better to be prepared than rushing around trying to figure out what you're going to do when you're asked to leave your home. So in terms of what we're going to learn during this session today, it's going to take about an hour. We're going to talk about what is a wildfire, what are the practical actions you can reduce, excuse me, you can take to reduce wildfire risk, how you can prepare for wildfires, and finally, the essentials during and after a wildfire. I should mention that Fire Smart Canada, a subject matter expert on wildfires in Canada, provided most of the content for this webinar. And as April has said, there'll be lots of resources available to you by the end of this course. And thank you, London, Ontario, Cree Nation, Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you. This is what we like to see. All right, so I'm going to pass it on to Jillian to talk about the next section, okay?
Thank you so much, Anna. It's so nice to see, responses from coast to coast, and so many responses looking for water. And A+, great suggestion. Loving also seeing the go bags being mentioned. So important to have a kit that's ready to go so that we can evacuate when needed, which we will discuss. But first, to get started, I'd just like to talk a bit about the Canadian Red Cross and what we do. Were you aware that Red Cross is one of the largest humanitarian organizations on the planet? We assist 78 Canadians every single day, and on average respond every 3 hours to things like house fires, floods, and pandemics. Disasters happen every single day, and it's so important to be prepared. Red Cross responded to over 2,500 emergency responses in Canada last year, and we supported over 250,000 people in Canada following an emergency, which is an amazing number. On the next slide, I'm just going to chat a little bit about climate change and wildfires. So what's going on? So data has shown that there's an increase in the frequency and the intensity of weather-related emergencies and disasters. We have something called the World Disasters Report, and it's shown that the average number of climate and weather-related disasters per decade has increased nearly 35% since the 1990s. Over the last 10 years, 83% of all disasters were caused by extreme weather and climate-related events like wildfires, storms, and heat waves. So we can see that there is a connection between climate change and the extreme events that we're seeing. In the next slide, we want to talk about how to reduce wildfire risk, but it's also important for us to understand what is a wildfire. Wildfires are a natural part of a wildland ecosystem. They happen regardless of if a community is there or not, or if humans were involved in the cause or not. Without wildfires, landscape loses its diversity. The wildfires recycle nutrients, help plants reproduce, and create a mosaic of vegetation that provides habitat for a variety of wildlife. But how does a wildfire start? Well, fire requires 3 key elements. Just to go back a slide there. Fire requires 3 elements, heat, fuel, and oxygen. It can start with just a spark or an ember, and then when combined with combustible materials such as trees, very highly flammable evergreens, you have a perfect situation for a wildfire. Fire can spread very fast depending on the surroundings and the conditions. For example, sparks or embers are burning debris, and they can be thrown up to 2 kilometers ahead of a wildfire. That's when we see, on the news when a wildfire jumped the road or jumped a river. Research shows that more than 50% of homes that are impacted or destroyed by wildfires are actually ignited by these embers. Dense and continuous forests, where trees are near each other, help wildfires spread quickly. The terrain can also affect how wildfire spreads. For example, fire tends to move faster uphill, whereas it goes slower moving along the flat ground. So just quickly go over how fire behaves and some basic mechanisms of heat transfer. So convection, We have the transfer of heat by the movement of hot air or gases, like when you open up your oven, you get hit right in the face with the heat. So during wildfires, burning materials on the forest floor create a convection current that preheats the leaves and branches of shrubs and trees that are above the fire. This can also cause vertical air currents that lift the burning material, so it makes them fly off, like those embers you're talking about. These are embers called fire brands, and they can settle in unburned areas ahead of the main fire and start successive smaller fires. This is called spotting, and it can result in rapid advancement of the fire. Firebrands can also ignite homes that are directly nearby if they land on flammable roofing or in accumulations of leaves and needles in gutters or on roofs. Another concept I'd like to introduce to you is radiation. So when objects are burning, they release energy in the form of heat. So the heat is radiating out. You can feel radiant heat when you stand near burning logs in a fireplace. Generally, the size of a burning object determines the amount of radiant heat that's released. So larger fuels will burn hotter than smaller fuels. So a leaf versus a tree. In most cases, the radiant heat from a wildfire won't ignite materials on homes at distances greater than 10 meters from the house. And then lastly, just quickly discuss conduction. This is the last mechanism of heat transfer. It's from direct contact or conduction. So for example, conduction is the heat that you feel when you touch a cup of hot water. Conduction carries heat through fuels, such as logs or house walls, and can raise the temperature of fuels to the point that they ignite. Heat transfer through conduction can only occur within the same object or objects that are touching that are close together. Now, I'd like to talk to you about wildland-urban interface. It's something that you may have heard before, perhaps in the media, or if you've been impacted by fires that are close to a community yourself. We've seen that as communities expand into natural areas and communities grow outwards, homes are increasingly placed in or near areas that are prone to wildfires. And this area is called the wildland-urban interface. This interface is where the human habitat meets and intermixes with the wildland. In the wildland-urban interface, human-built fuels like vehicles, fences, decks, and buildings combine with wildland fuels such as trees, and those are all fuels available to advance a wildfire. When we combine all of these elements, the wildland and the built fuels, it results in what we call a wildland-urban interface fuel complex. Bigger acronym, it's okay. The wildland-urban interface is the most at-risk zone for individuals and communities. So that area where the two meet, that's where we're most at risk. I'm going to pass this over to Anna to talk about the impacts of wildfire.
Thank you, Jillian. Okay, so I think many of you probably already know some of these impacts. Obviously, wildfires can devastate not only communities, but they can destroy buildings, infrastructure, and even in some cases will claim lives. They can also, as you know, spread quickly, forcing families to evacuate just as quickly, or communities to evacuate as quickly as possible. The financial toll of wildfire insurance losses has really been staggering, reaching a total of $5.6 billion in the last 10 years in Western Canada alone. Some of you may have known or have experienced the West Kelowna fire in 2009, 2011 Slave Lake, and in 2016 Fort McMurray. Canada's 2023 wildfire season was the most destructive ever recorded, and by September 5th, more than 6,100 fires had torched a staggering 16.5 million hectares of land. So if you've ever been to Greece, think of the size of Greece, and that's how much land was destroyed. And this is a Natural Resources Canada factoid for your information. So understanding wildfire risk. And I think, April, you're going to be sharing something in the chat pod here. Not too sure. Okay. So in understanding excuse me, your wildfire risk, please remember that every home, every property, thank you very much, April, every individual is unique, and every situation has a unique wildfire risk. As I mentioned, in passing, the last decade has been the warmest in record throughout North America. Climate change, overall forest health, increasing development of wildland areas across the country that Jillian spoke about have increased the threat of Canadian communities. There are approximately 11 million Canadians currently living in an area of significant wildfire risk. We'll get April to put up the next slide, which shows you in the map of Canada and all that purple area, most of it, of course, close to the American border. This is the wildland urban interface zone in Canada. Okay. On average in Canada, wildfires burn 2.5 million hectares per year, nearly half the size of Nova Scotia. So if you can picture Nova Scotia on the map there. Most wildfires occur between April and September, but of course, you know, this is a changing climate. You know, times are changing in terms of when these wildfires are occurring. The risks are unique to each community, to each home, to each property, right? And of course, by downloading the Fire Smart Begins at Home app, you can do your own self-assessment of your home and property. All right, so let's take a further look at reducing your risk of wildfire damage. And there's a difference between property owners and tenants. But we all have a role to play in reducing the risk of wildfire damage. Whether you rent or own your own property, you're responsible for managing those risks. And in terms of property owners, they're responsible for reducing the risk damage to their lots, to their buildings, personal belongings. You know, if they're renting, if they have buildings where they're renting to people, they are responsible for those buildings. You know, and they in fact may purchase home insurance to help repair damage, replace belongings, and in some cases we'll cover the cost of any emergency accommodations. Tenants, on the other hand, are generally responsible for reducing the risk of damage to their own personal belongings. So it all depends on the lease that you sign with your building owner or your landlord. But there also may be some additional maintenance that you are responsible for as a tenant. We always tell people that it's such a good idea to purchase tenant insurance to help replace damaged belongings and, of course, to cover the cost of emergency accommodation. But be aware, and I know that when I'm involved in personal disaster assistance responses, tenants have no idea that landlords do not typically cover these costs. Whatever you have in your apartment, you are responsible for. The landlord is responsible for the building. And I can tell you there's a sticker shock there for a lot of people when they find out, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Or they say, do you think the landlord would be able to pay for this? And so it's important that the tenant also has insurance. Okay, so covering costs caused by fire as part of your insurance policy is really a good idea. All right, let's go on to the next slide, and we've got yes, yeah, good for me to know it, good for everybody to know. All right, and here's your question. And I want you to use your chat pod. We've talked about what a wildfire is, what the impact is of wildfires, and the risk that it represents. Do you know what to do to reduce your risk and prepare for wildfires? So I want you to share your answer on the chat pod. Do you know what to do to reduce your risk and prepare for wildfires? And I check the chat and see whether or not you're answering this. Yes, thank you, Diane. Yeah, dry leaves, branches, fuel starters around the home, vegetation, trees. Yes, especially coniferous trees. Cut down trees that encroach in the house. Yeah, yeah, very good. Thank you, Sandra. Anybody else? Reduce the amount of combustibles. Thank you, Joe. Be aware of your surroundings. Yes, remove plastic items from the deck. Yeah, remove. Yeah, yeah. I always find with although it might not turn into a wildfire, but I always find having your barbecue so close to your, on your deck, close to your house, is always sort of a red flag. And I've been to fires where that's happened, and the barbecue's gone up in smoke. And our community's been cleaning around the homes. Oh, excellent, Adrian. Take away your grass rug up your door. Oh my, yeah. Storage of fuel. Excellent answers. Just wonderful. Thank you. Keep them coming. There are practical actions, as you can see here, that you can do to reduce the risk of wildfires, protect your home and your property, because you might have a couple of acres of land as well, and prepare your household in case of wildfires. Okay, so in this next section, which I'm going to turn over to Jillian, we're going to talk about 6 practical actions you can take to protect your home and property, and then I'll come back and talk about the 4 steps to prepare your household. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I'm seeing lots of great answers to your question. And some of them are coming up in my next few slides. So I'm going to talk to you about how to reduce your wildfire risk, looking at the home ignition zone. So starting with the home, reducing, removing, and converting combustible vegetation within this zone on our private properties is super important. Post-fire studies, experiments, and models have all shown that homes ignite due to the condition of the home itself and everything that surrounds it, up to 100 meters away from the foundation. And we call this area the home ignition zone. And we should be focusing our efforts. We can start by addressing the condition of the house and then work outwards, taking steps to reduce fuel for embers, surface fires, and large flames. So you can see in the image there, the immediate zone is 1 to 1.5 meters away from your home. So that's the immediate area. And it's also the immediate area around your outbuilding. So if you have a detached or attached shed, garage, if you have a burnout building, for example, consider those as well. The intermediate zone is from 1.5 to 10 meters from your home. And then the extended zone is 10 meters to 30 meters from your home. Now, depending on where you live, you'll know that there are some of your neighbors are in that zone as well. So it's important to recognize that sometimes we need to help educate our neighbors about being fire smart too. So in terms of some practical actions we can take to reduce the risk of wildfire, very important to keep your roof, your gutter, your eaves and vents clean and free from debris. The gutters on a home provide a excellent storage place for combustible debris to accumulate. Great for the debris, not great for you. We have seen and heard from air crews who are dropping water that they will, pass an area and there'll be one home, in the middle that's engulfed in flames, and the rest are okay for now because that one home was caught by an ember. So having less things around your home to catch on fire is extremely important. Remember to inspect your vents and openings regularly to ensure the vents are in good repair. Remove any accumulated combustible debris. And if you're like me and you only just hit summer last week on the East Coast, shaking out, your barbecue that somebody may have taken residence in over the winter, things like that. The second thing I'll mention is removing items that can easily ignite on, around, and under your deck. So needles from trees, leaves, other debris from decks and balconies, make sure that's clear. Remove combustible debris and other attached structures. Remove combustible debris and vegetation on and around decks and other attached structures, so like your garage, your shed, outbuildings. That's a key factor to reduce vulnerability to ignition during a wildfire. And avoid storing combustible materials on and under the deck. On the next slide, it's really important, like I mentioned in the home ignition zone slide, to maintain that 1.5 meter zone around your home. Great if it's a hardened surface around that home and deck. Move firewood, construction materials, tools, and decorations into the garage or more than 10 meters away from the home. So taking it to the extended zone. Regular maintenance and cleaning in the corners and crevices of the home and yard, so the corner of the fence line, up against the deck, the corner of the deck. This is places where the wind can blow this debris and it can accumulate, leaving a great space for embers to land. Also important to remove vegetation and ground cover that can easily ignite from within 1.5 meters of your home. I know that FireSmart has started some work working with landscapers to more clearly identify the safer vegetation for around a home. So that's something to think about the next time you go lawn and garden shopping. Maintaining that 1.5 meters of non-combustible surface around the entire home and attachments, super important. And if possible, install hard surfaces like a concrete walkway or use non-combustible mulch products. So instead of using the wood mulch, using, decorative rock or stone, is very, very important. It can reduce your risk substantially in case of a wildfire. And the last two that I'd like to speak about is reducing the chances of embers igniting your home. So firstly, prune evergreen tree branches 2 meters from the ground to help prevent surface fires from moving up. So we often see, fires that are on the ground, that's a ground fire. If they are approaching trees and there's a ladder for the fire to climb, by taking those low-hanging branches, medium height shrubs, and so forth, it could actually start to ignite the tree. So the fire moves up the tree, and now instead of the fire being on the ground, it's going along the tops of trees. That's called a crown fire. So these ladder fuels, they're things like shrubs, small trees, and low-hanging branches. And they facilitate that movement from the ground to the crown. So wherever possible, pruning and removing those items of vegetation around your home is very important. And lastly, I appreciate no mow May more than anybody because the bees are very important. But as you get further into wildfire season, it is very important to regularly mow your lawn and maintain it as less than 10 centimeters. A mowed lawn is a fire-resistant lawn, and grasses that are shorter than 10 centimeters in height are less likely to burn intensely. It's newer growth, it's less dry, and it's also very important to keep your lawn well irrigated. Some localities will have water restrictions, especially during extreme heat or low water levels. So make sure that you pay attention to local conditions for watering. But wherever possible, make sure that you are maintaining a very well irrigated lawn. And I'm going to pass it back over to my friend Anna to talk about preparing for yourself for a wildfire.
Thanks, Jillian. And some of those responses they keep on coming into the chat, and I agree. Being a gardener, you really have to be careful. Not only looking at the ground, but also any trees that are growing and making sure. Yeah, thanks, Diane. 10 centimeters at 4 inches. Yeah, so I mean, all of these things are so important. Decrease the amount of mulch that you're using, and just make sure you're clearing things away as much as possible. All right, so we've seen the 6 practical ways, and there are probably others as well. And some of you are probably doing other things as well. So if you have any other suggestions, don't forget to put those in the chat. So we've looked at those 6 practical ways to reduce the risk of wildfires. Now I want to examine the 4 steps of preparing your household for wildfires. And many of you have probably seen at least 3 of these steps when you're doing any kind of be ready programming or be ready for any kind of emergency. Excuse me. So step number 1 is know the risk. You know, one of the primary sources of information is your local area, municipality, offices, your community. You can call or visit the website if in your area to find out what kind of services are offered. The local alert system is always a good thing to be plugged into, and any evacuation procedures that your city or your community has already got in place. Following social media. In fact, in some cases, social media such as Facebook may in fact be sharing information in real time. So that's always good to know as well. Watch TV or listen to your crank radio, because you know what, there might be a lot of things going on there that relay information that is issued locally. I have signed up for weather alerts on my cell phone here in Ottawa, and I've downloaded the Government of Canada's WeatherCan mobile app and the Weather Network mobile app. So you know, I think I've covered all the bases. You want to get more preparedness information? Go to the Be Ready section of the Red Cross website and the Get Prepared section on the Canadian or the Government of Canada website. And finally, it's always good to check in with the Public Health Agency of Canada for any complementary information, such as mental and emotional well-being resources that might be available to you. All right. Step number 2. So you know the risks, you make a plan. All right, and April's going to put up another link for the emergency plan for the Red Cross. There's a nice picture of it here in the slide. We give this out on the Be Ready, all the Be Ready workshops that we provide. So in this case, excuse me, if you're living with other family members in your home, it's good to do this together. Okay, do it with your kids, with your if you're living with your parents. Always good to have everybody involved in this. You know, having an emergency plan is going to help you gather your essential information, and if you're thinking ahead of time about what you're going to do in the case of a wildfire, you know, how are you going to evacuate your home? Where will you go? So by creating, and it's not enough to create a plan. I mean, you can look at this plan all you want, but if you do not practice that plan, then you know you are decreasing your capacity to keep safe during a wildfire. So to increase that capacity, make sure that you and whoever's in your household practices that plan. We have that emergency preparedness planning document, as you can see on the slide, and we usually gather things like important information and documents. I always have my health card, my driver's license, my passport, any information on insurance, banking, all of those kinds of things. And you want to identify a meeting place, because you know what, your household may be in different areas of the city, and you have to figure out where your meeting place is beforehand. And it's always good to have 2 meeting places, because if it's a large wildfire, your first meeting place may, I'm sorry to say, it may have already gone up in smoke. Okay, so you have to think of those kinds of things. So outside, let me see, create an evacuation plan. You know, how are you going to evacuate? How are you going to evacuate your family? And obviously a communication plan using what we use these contact cards. We give these out during the Be Ready workshops as well. You know, who's the person you contact the most? Your doctor. If you have animals and livestock, maybe your vet. All right, etc. So those are the sorts of things that you need to include in your plan. If you don't have a vehicle, have a transportation plan. You might want to, touch base with your neighbor, and maybe he or she has a vehicle, and then that's going to be help for you. Obviously, if possible, insure for fire damage. So make sure your home insurance covers for damage due to fire. Right. And as I said at the beginning this workshop or this webinar, your plan and anything that you do is specific to you, unique to you. All right, they're unique to the needs of your household, and so it's going to be different from my plan. It's going to be different from Jillian's plan, and April's plan, and everybody else around the table today. Everybody's got a different plan, right? But consider if you live with children, if you live with your parents or elderly adults, you have pets or animals of any kind, and if you live with individuals who have specific needs, like mobility needs, these all have to be part of your plan. Have I made my point? I think so. All right. So the third step is, okay, you know your risks, you made a plan, and now you're building a kit. And once again, I'm going to tell you, it's unique to you. If you live alone, your kit's going to be very different from somebody with 10 kids. All right. So I think it's just common sense. All right. So again, April is sharing. I'm going to check this. She's sharing on the chat pod the checklist that we make available to people about putting together a kit. And you know what? You probably have most of this stuff in your home already. Right? You don't have to go out and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You have that. We all have a backpack. I think we all have a backpack. We all probably have one of those rolling, carry-on cases. Again, depending on how many people you don't want to do it while you're being asked to evacuate because there's a wildfire nipping at your front door. All right, you want to do this beforehand. Have your kit ready. Have it somewhere where everybody knows. If you have children, they may have their own kit. Right. There's a grab and go kit. You can see in the slide here, just grab a backpack and you're out. All right. Shelter in place kit. You're being asked to stay at home. All right. And that's, you have to have everything there. So Jillian says, I recently made a kit for 2 people for $30. There you go. See, dollar store. All right. I also have a car kit. If you're working outside the home, having one there is also very helpful as well. But please remember 3 things you should remember when you're putting together a kit. Include items that are linked to warmth, to food, and to water. And remember when I asked you that question at the beginning of this webinar, what's the one thing, many of you said water, right? Some of you said other things, but many of you said water, right? Prioritize assembling a grab and go kit to be ready for any kind of an evacuation. It should have enough supplies to last you for up to 72 hours. Because remember, our first responders are going to be working, trying to get behind the fire. All right. Another thing I should mention before I go to number 4 and send this back to Jillian, wildfire smoke is really a complex mixture of air pollutants that are harmful to human health. They can also be harmful to animal health as well. Having masks to protect yourself and your loved ones is so important. We suggest N95 masks that protects from smoke. And most of you probably had those during COVID-19. So, I'm sure that there are some still around. All right. All right. The 4th step, and this might in fact be new to you, is building a network. Know your neighbors, attend neighborhood events, become a member of a local organization, join online community groups. Having that support from others is terribly important. It's essential to get help, and it's essential to get help when you need it. Your neighbor might be your best bet to get out, right? There is, although you can't see it very much, there is a Red Cross bookmark, Get Connected. I think that's what it is here. Yeah. Which you'll find in the resources that'll be shared with you after this webinar. Just a simple tool that can help you reach out to your neighbors. Hi neighbor, my name is, yada, yada, yada. I can tell you that during COVID-19, one of the saddest things when we were doing outreach is we were going to to apartment buildings where people, we know the city of Ottawa said, there are people who are at risk, and we go make sure they were okay. Do you know your neighbor? Oh, no, don't know my neighbor. Oh no, I'd never knock on their door. Oh no. And this is a sad reality. And even in some communities where you have single family homes, people don't know their neighbors. So it's important that you have a network. You talk to family and neighbors about what you would do during a wildfire. Learn those safety techniques. I think we've all heard of stop, drop, and roll in case your clothing is set on fire. These are the sorts of things you can discuss with your community, and it's so important because if you have a family who lives on the other side of the country, you're not going to be asking them to come and help you. You really need to know that network of neighbors, yeah. I think that's it for me. Jillian, I think you're up next. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you for taking us through those steps. They're so important, very easy to remember. And like I said in the chat, it doesn't take much to build a kit. You most likely have a lot of things around your home just scattered. But what I'm going to talk to you about now is some essential tips for during a wildfire. So thanks to Anna, we know what to do before a wildfire, but now we're going to go over the essentials for during a wildfire, what we need to know or do. So firstly, it's super important to know the difference between evacuation alert and evacuation order. An evacuation alert means we should be ready to leave on short notice. So it could happen, we should get ready just in case. Whereas evacuation order, it means we are at risk and we should evacuate the area immediately, following the routes and directions specified by officials and move away from the fire. During a wildfire, conditions can change rapidly, so it's crucial to monitor conditions and follow the advice of local authorities. They'll be using things like drones, satellite, high tower cameras, so they can see things that are changing that we might not be able to see from our vehicle or our home. So that's why it's so important to listen to them. Be prepared if on alert to evacuate at any time. You can prepare your car and house in a few simple ways. So making sure that your car is fueled at home and ready to go. During the Fort McMurray evacuation, we saw many vehicles who couldn't make it all the way to Edmonton because they ran out of fuel. They weren't able to fuel up. The gas station, several of them were impacted by the fire. So making sure that you have fuel in your vehicle, that you have backed into your driveway so you can drive straight out. Making sure to keep your car windows closed, and that prevents an ember from getting inside and catching the upholstery, and reduces the smoke in the car. If possible, and you have your grab and go kit that Anna talked about, keep it, put it in your car. So you just have to take yourself and, your few, purse essentials, wallet, keys, and get out. When you're leaving in your house, turn off the air conditioning. That will help with smoke coming into the home. Turning off electricity and gas reduces the fuel load of your home in the event that fire does reach it. And it's very practical, safe tip to take anyway. And make sure to close all doors, garage doors, and windows. If your weather seals or doors have gaps, seal them with duct tape, and that prevents the air from passing back and forth. If you do not or cannot evacuate, close all your windows and doors in the house to reduce smoke and debris entering your home. And that, again, you would, if needed, to shelter in place, use that duct tape if you've lost your weather seals. And in case I haven't said it enough, if you are ordered to evacuate, do so immediately. It's very, very important. It's for your safety, but also the safety of the firefighters and fire personnel who are trying to, A, save all the homes in the area, but B, save the people in them, and make sure that we're honoring their safety as well. On the next slide, I have a few tips that we can take to manage wildfire smoke in your home. So as we know, smoke can travel a bit further and a bit faster sometimes than fire, and we could be impacted by wildfire smoke from a community that is tens or hundreds of kilometers away. So some things we can do is firstly paying attention to the air quality health index. 1 is good, 10 is not good, it's very bad. Anna mentioned having alerts on our phone for weather. And Environment Climate Change Canada, they actually also include the Air Quality Health Index in their weather reporting. So if you have their app, you go on their website, you can also see that there. Secondly, when we're dealing with a high amount of smoke outdoors, is to stay indoors as much as possible, especially if we have pre-existing conditions like COPD, emphysema, and so forth. Use quality air filters in your ventilation system or have portable ones. If you're able to, you can actually purchase a small scrubber, and while it might not be able to do your whole home, you can certainly reduce your living space to have a few clean rooms with clean air. Close all windows indoors, and that will keep the smoke outside, and stay hydrated. Very important to every day stay hydrated. But certainly when you're dealing with a stressful situation, with wildfire, smoke, heat, staying hydrated is very, very important. I'm just going to briefly talk about after a wildfire. So what do we happen, when we're preparing to come home or we are coming home? So firstly, stay safe. Continue to take precautions and listen to and follow directions from local authorities. Only re-enter your home if you're authorized to do so by the officials, and use caution when entering burned areas. Like when you're driving into, for example, a burned neighborhood, there are still hazards there. We could see debris, falling trees, hot spots could reignite, could flare up, and that can happen without warning. Next, stay healthy. So ensure your water and your food are safe on return home. So discard food that might have been exposed to heat, smoke, or soot, and do not use contaminated water. Take care of yourself. Emergencies like wildfires can be very stressful, so make sure you're alert to the signs of stress in yourself and your loved ones and address them when they rise. And if they keep persisting, seek help within the community. You could reach out to 811 or 211 for resources if needed. And lastly, on return home, inspecting your home. So check with local authorities to see if disaster financial assistance is offered and if you're eligible. You can contact your local government office or your municipality for help finding temporary housing. If you cannot stay home during a fire due to fire damage, they may be able to connect you with some other resources, and they'll be your primary point of contact unless otherwise specified. Take an inventory and photos of room material, furnitures, and so on. And actually a proactive tip that you can take that I've been recommending since I started with Red Cross, go around your home today and take photos of everything. And then you know what the pre-existing home was like. It's much easier to get insurance to replace items that way. And lastly, contact your insurance company to see what is covered and to get the claim process started. All right, so to summarize, where are we? What have we learned today so far? So we know that there is an increase in the frequency and intensity of weather-related emergencies and disasters like wildfires. We've heard that wildfire hazard and risk in each community is unique, and that the wildfire risks for each home and property are also unique. There are simple and low-cost actions, many of which you already knew, that residents can take to reduce their risk of wildfire to their homes, their property, and to prepare. Being proactive and consistent action is a great, great place to start. In the next slide, just like to chat about some of the resources we promised we would share. So there's QR codes there for each one. So you can snap a pic with your phone, or when we send out the slideshow, you can certainly do it that way as well. So the first is the Canadian Wildland Fire Information System. I actually use this weekly, if not daily. It is a live map of fires that are happening across the country. You can look at fire weather, you can look at fire danger, you can look at the resources that are deployed, and it's a federal resource through NRCam. The next resource there is 3 steps to a cost-effective fire smart home. Fire Smart is such a great resource. When you click on this one, I strongly encourage you, don't just stay there, continue on to the rest of the Fire Smart website. And linked to that is the Fire Smart Being Aids at Home application. There's actually an app that you can download through FireSmart on Google Play or the Apple iPhone store. And download the FireSmart app and you can work through some of the tips and suggestions there. And then lastly, we have a wildfire page. We have some of our resources there as well. So very much recommend that you check those resources out, if only to have a look at them to familiarize yourself in the event that you need them or want to prepare more in the future. And thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Anna.
Thank you. This is the first time we've talked together and it's been great.
Yes. I'm going to invite April back to have a chat with us before we wrap up.
This was so informative. I feel like I learned so much, even though in my neck of the woods, we don't necessarily have a lot of wildfire risk. This is really good information for me to know just in general. I think everyone learned so much as well. And I would love to actually ask folks, we would love to get some of your feedback on the following two questions that we have for you. What type of hazards are you most likely to face in your area? Oh, oops. Actually, sorry. That was the wrong poll. I apologize. If you're able to actually enter in the chat for us instead, that was a technical glitch. Apologies. But if you folks were able to tell us just a little bit right now, is there anything preventing you from preparing for an emergency or a disaster? And what could the Canadian Red Cross do to help you to prepare for emergencies or disasters? Any sort of things that you'd like to share with us, that would be wonderful. And we will be taking that back with us as we continue on this disaster preparedness series throughout the summer. Time and awareness, for sure. Yes, keep offering these webinars. That's awesome. Thanks, Momin. Keep offering these webinars. Yep. We will be continuing these through the summer. There's a lot more programming to come. Feel free to register at our webpage that we will share again. And we'll likely be continuing through September. Also, time, money constraints, webinars, and shareable PDFs, resources. We'll also be sharing resources as well on our webpage. Taking the time to prepare a kit. Yep. Awesome. Yes, Anna.
Okay, I just have, there was a question in the chat. I can't remember who asked it about having an extra fuel in your car. Is this a good idea or not? And then somebody said that they have extra fuel for their generator, but they keep it in a cool place. So does anybody have anything to add to that? Anybody?
Yeah, any tips from folks in the chat? This knowledge sharing is one of the really valuable things of us coming together in this way.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I personally wouldn't keep a you know, Jefferson train by. Okay. I don't know whether I'd keep extra fuel in my car, especially if you knew that there was a possibility of a wildfire. I don't know. Yes, potentially unsafe. Yeah. Well, this is why we do these things, right?
Absolutely. Before we launch,
Jillian. Thanks, April.
Thank you. I think we have a couple of announcements to make before we actually launch into a small formal Q&A session. And we have one formal Q&A question in our box, but if folks have additional questions for our amazing facilitators, now is the time to get your questions in. But we will be sending a recording, and please answer our feedback survey that will pop up on your browser as soon as you exit this webinar. So it will appear, and we would love your feedback on how we did today. And our next webinar is actually on Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday, supporting families in emergencies, 2 to 3 p.m. EST, 12 to 1 p.m. Mountain Time, not EST. And please register on our webpage using these QR codes. All right. And okay, so in terms of the Q&A box, Dan Harkins asks you both, Jillian and Anna, I did miss the beginning. Not sure if this was discussed. What are the main causes of wildfires? Unfortunately, this has become political, and many believe they are started on purpose to push a climate change agenda.
I can take that, if you don't mind, Anna. I've been working on a number of wildfire files, say that 10 times fast, over the last 10, 12 years. And either through my own experience or education or just speaking with evacuees, folks who have returned home, folks who are impacted, reading the after action reports, there is a really big mix of causes. Forest fires will happen whether or not humans are around. Forest fires have happened since the dawn of time before we had humans. It's a natural part of the ecosystem. So they happen naturally. Humans can contribute to forest fires happening through human activity. So oftentimes when we hear on media that a forest fire was human caused, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an arsonist. It could be something as simple as a train moving through a community in British Columbia, right? So the Lytton fire was caused by a spark from a train on the train track during a 40-degree day, right? So we would say that that's human or industry caused. Similarly, having ATVs in the forest when it's very, very dry, industrial activity like logging, chainsaws, that sort of thing, that can happen. But what we often see, especially in Canada, especially in the north, is, you are right, Brandy, lightning. So lightning is often a cause of forest fires. So that isn't to say that climate change doesn't play a part, because it certainly does. What climate change is contributing to is making the environment more able to facilitate a forest fire. So it's turning up the temperature, it's making the vegetation more dry, it's causing drought. Most of Canada was under a drought for the majority of the winter because we had a very low snowpack. So climate change does definitely play a factor. It increases the likelihood. It doesn't actually cause a forest fire. The cause of forest fires have always been the same once humans came around. So it's just that climate change contributes, but it's not a causal factor.
Right. Thank you, Jillian.
No problem.
It was those Homo erectus who started using fire, and then after that, everything went crazy. So.
That's right.
You're welcome, Dan.
If anyone has any last question for our facilitators, now is the time. We have 2 minutes left in our session today. You can either use the chat, just throw it in the chat, or use the Q&A box. Otherwise, I'm going to go back to the QR codes here if you'd like to access our webpage, and we will be continuing to have sessions for you to register there. Okay, great. All right, I think the crowd is good. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us today. This was so wonderful. And thank you to you, Anna and Jillian, for all the information you shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.